So my recent video where I did a little bit of mudlarking down at Porchester Shore was quite popular and I enjoyed it too. So I popped back down there the other day for another go. This time I went a different direction along the shore, and I did find a place where there's obviously been a historical bottle dump because there was lots and lots of broken glass, incomplete broken bottles, some of them actually quite old and some of them with embossing on them and so on, quite interesting, including some interesting bits of china and all sorts of other relics. It's fair to say that the camera I took with me on this mudlarking session was little better than a potato, but I had to have something that was easy to use with dirty fingers. Because there was actually quite a lot to look at and examine and pick up on this shore, I set myself some ground rules this time. To avoid coming home with a bucket full of pottery fragments, I decided I would only pick up things that were either complete or very interesting to talk about. A lot of the foreshore is obscured by bladderwrack seaweed, which I'm hoping will die back a little bit during the winter and might get me a better look at some of the surface underneath and maybe some other finds. Anyway, so these are the 4 items that I brought back from this trip. So the first one we're going to talk about is this. This is an electrical insulator. So this has been attached to, would have had a bayonet type of fitting that went in there. Let's have a close look. So there would be a metal plug or something that pushes in there and twists and locks in place. When I first saw it sticking up out of the mud, I thought it was the rim of a inkwell bottle. But when I unearthed it, it turned out to be this electrical insulator. Only when I got it home did I realise that it actually has some writing on it. So if we have a close look at that, it says Admiralty Pattern Number 835A. Now, the Admiralty Pattern Number catalogue is something that was created in the middle of the Victorian era, I think, and persisted through to the middle of the 20th century. Now, it seems likely that this, because it's to do with high voltage electricity, is probably from the later part of that time period, so probably early to mid 20th century. I couldn't actually find pattern number 835A. There are catalogues of some of these pattern numbers inside various other people's historical projects, but I couldn't find this number. The Admiralty Pattern Number catalogue is very, very strange. It contains basically part numbers for everything that the Royal Navy might have ordered at any particular time from suppliers, including all the way from hairbrushes to radar equipment. This would have been a high voltage insulator, so this would have been attached to a post or something like that probably, and with high voltage wire strung around these 2 sort of notches that are around the circumference. One of the things I thought was particularly interesting about this as well is if we look really closely, we can see that there's some of the glaze has melted here, and there's what appears to be spattered metal on there, just on that bit there, which suggests to me that maybe that this insulator failed at some point, and maybe there was a spark that ran across there to ground, caused a fire, caused some of the conductor to evaporate and spatter onto there. That's just speculation. That could just be corrosion and discoloration from having been buried in tidal mud for half a century. Don't really know, but interesting to speculate. The next item is this Vulcanite bottle stopper. So this is one of the things that Nicola White, who does mudlarking in the Thames estuary, is often finding. This is a particularly worn example. Let's have a close look. So this example has been worn down a bit by tumbling around in the waves. So we can no longer see the maker's mark, which would have been on the top there. I mean, it's tempting to imagine that some of these marks are writing, but they're probably just cracks. We can just about see traces of the knurling around the edge that would have helped people to grip this bottle stopper. This is made from a kind of hard rubber called Vulcanite. It would have had a kind of washer around there, or a gasket made of softer rubber, and it's got a screw thread on it. And that screw thread would engage with a negative screw thread on the top of a bottle, and it would have been screwed into place on the top of that bottle. Probably a bottle of beer or lemonade. So there we go, a Vulcanite bottle stopper. Not the most brilliant example, but nevertheless an interesting find. The third thing is this, which is a ship's nail. This is a copper nail that's been used for joining planks together or joining planks to a rib in a wooden boat. Really difficult to tell how old this might be because this technology is very old, but for people building boats to traditional methods or restoring historical boats, these are still in use, albeit not very much. So it looks like a rivet, doesn't it? But in fact, this is what's called a Rove Nail. And it's got a conventional nail head on this end, which looks like a little countersink nail head. And it would have had a spike on this end. It would have been pointed at this end. And this would have been driven through the timber, 2 pieces of timber at least, through a pilot hole probably, because it's just made of copper, which is not a very hard metal. And it would have had a spike on this end. And then when the spike emerges from the inside of the timber, they drive something that's a bit like a copper washer onto it, called a rove, drive it right down flat against the wood, snip off any excess point, and then hammer the point down, sort of peen it over with a hammer to form this rivet head here, and you can just about see the traces of that there. So that's the head of the original, or that's the point rather, flattened out of the original nail right there. And you can see that the head is different from the pointed end, because here we've got a kind of countersink, here we've got a right angle where the point of that nail would have met this rove, which is a kind of copper washer. So it's not possible to say how old that is. It could be centuries, it could be 50 years, but interesting to look at nonetheless. And then finally this, which is a urchin fossil, so let's have a close look at that. There. So this is the fossil of the test or exoskeleton of an urchin or echinoid. And we can see where in life these stripes down here, I think these are where spines or tentacles would have emerged from the urchin. Sea urchins are still obviously around today, but this is a fossil of one that's millions of years in the past. So I've found urchin fossils like this before. In fact, I used to work just down the road from where I did all this mudlarking in Porchester, and sometimes I used to walk out in my lunch hour just on the beach there and wander around and pick things up. And so on previous trips to the same area, I found these 3 similar urchin fossils. So let's have a close look at those. So this one's quite similar to what we've just seen, except it's complete, well, nearly complete. It's been broken during the process of fossilization. But there we go. So we can see the form of the creature a little bit better there. They have 5-fold radial symmetry. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the 5th line would have been just down here. So that's that one. This one's very similar. In fact, these 2 are very similar to the one I found. They're half of the fossil. So that's again, cracked and slightly crushed example of the urchin. And this one here, same sort of size really as the one I found just recently, but interestingly asymmetric on the bottom. Now I don't know if that's just because that's the way the urchin was. Sometimes these urchins don't have complete symmetry. They sometimes are a little bit offset, and we'll have a look at a different example of that in a moment. Or it could be that this thing fossilized in place and created a cavity, and then perhaps the actual test of the urchin turned, and before it was finally set and crushed. I don't know. Anyway, that's that one. But this one that I found most recently is a really, really good specimen. It's a really nice example. Even though it's only half of the urchin, it's just really nice and intact. Now, there's something interesting about this one, and I'll show you what that is. On the inside, I can see what looks like 3 little marks there, and 3 matching, kind of symmetric marks on that side, plus what appears to be a kind of circular feature here with little cellular blob type features inside of it. What I'm going to do, I'll put that up on the screen. I don't know how much of that you can see on camera, and indeed how much of what I'm seeing is my imagination and seeing patterns where none exist, but I will put that up on screen there, and I'm going to sketch on this side what I think I'm seeing. So, what are we looking at here? Well, it could be, although it seems very, very unlikely, that this is fossilized evidence of soft tissues from the creature that originally lived inside this exoskeleton. Seems really unlikely. That's not something you usually find in flint fossils, but, you know, it's a big old world. Strange things sometimes happen. It could be just evidence of the way the minerals have crystallized and formed inside of here, or it could be something that's purely a surface phenomenon. So this could be just the way that this surface has broken and weathered and discolored over time. Really, the only way to be surer about that is for me to grind this down. Now it's already very, very flat, as we can see. It's got a little bit of a raised edge there. So in a future video, I'm going to get some abrasives and I'm going to grind this down and polish it completely flat and smooth and take away all of the surface dirt and discoloration and see if there is some structure underneath there that tells us anything about how this formed, or maybe what it was like when it was alive. Or maybe all of that will disappear and I'll just be presented with a smooth, featureless piece of rock. We will see, but that's coming up in a future video. While we're here, I'll just show you two other urchin fossils that I picked up from the shore nearby. So this was these were in Porchester shore. This I found a little way down the coast at Leon Solent. So this is a heart urchin, and this is what I meant when I said some of these urchins are not completely radially symmetric. So heart urchins have got a heart shape, and so they still have this five-fold symmetry, but they're not completely circular. And so there's a notch at the top, and usually when they're complete, a kind of slightly pointed bottom. And this one is a sea urchin that's been tumbled naturally in the surf. So this one I found at Hill Head, which is again just down the coast. And you can see the striations there. It's nearly been polished away actually, so nearly all of the surface anatomy of this fossil has been polished away, but there's still evidence of the striations there and the five-fold symmetry of an urchin on the bottom there. So there we go, that's my 4 finds from this little session of mudlarking, and these are some of my things from my collection that I thought you might be interested to see. Okay, well, we're going to take a little wander down through this bit of woodland. I brought you here quite a few times before. In fact, the last time I think we were out in the forest with Jenny and the dog was in this location. However, that was earlier in the year. And as you can see, there's quite a lot of change happened to the woods right now. Last time when we came out here, it was acorn time and all of the acorns were falling. Now it's very much solidly autumn, and so we get this wonderful light through the trees, and if we just stand here we can watch leaves slowly falling. In fact, I think I might set the camera up a bit later and capture just some slow TV of the leaves falling. If you'd like that, there'll be a link in the video description. So our objective today does include a little bit of foraging, so if I find any good mushrooms, we'll be taking them home. But actually, it'll be nice just to be out here in the forest. We've had significant rainfall since the last time I was out here, so that might have given the fungi a little bit of a boost, hopefully, but we shall see. Now I have already seen 1 or 2 fungi. I've seen some rather weather-beaten chanterelles, yellow chanterelles, and 1 or 2 other things. But I'm not going to pick the first thing I come across. The trick with foraging, I think, is just to have a look around and wait until we find something that's worth picking. So the first, second, third thing I find, not necessarily going to pick it. After that, once we find something that we think is some kind of an abundance, then we might let ourselves pick a few to take home. But never pick more than half of what's there, And I never pick more than I really need to either, which sometimes is a battle with the conscience, but I don't like waste. So this is the spot when I was here last year that was absolutely crammed with Boletus edulis, the cep or penny bun or porcini. And there were so many of them you could hardly move without knocking them over. However, I don't think there's going to be a single one this year. For one thing, the rains came a bit late in the year, and also I suspect the fungus, which is an organism that lives underground anyway, might be having a rest this year. But you know, hopefully we'll find something to take home. If not, we're still going to have a lovely walk in the woods. Now also last time I was here, I actually walked down this watercourse here. This is, well, it's not a natural stream, it's a drainage ditch that's been cut by people. It's part of a drainage system. In fact, you can see it all over this woodland here. There's a ditch that runs down here into it. There's another one over there that branches off and goes up the hill and so on. It's part of a land drainage network here that, when these trees were planted, was probably cut into the ground to give these trees a chance to be not growing in a bog. So this is an artificial watercourse, and I walked down it last time, and the bit I walked down was actually pretty dead straight, but this has been here, well, I don't know, probably at least 30 years, probably 50 years. Judging by the size of these trees around here, I would say that we can estimate that these were planted, I don't know, what, 50 years ago? The biggest trees here look like they might be 50 years old. So I thought it'd be interesting to find a straight stretch of this drainage ditch and see if we can see any evidence of nature taking over and a meander beginning to develop in the river. If you don't know what a meander is, it's what rivers do. So rivers, you'd think water would want to run in a straight line, but actually the dynamics of water and sediment mean that it tends to erode corners and deposit on the inside of those corners, and that can cause the river to change course over time, and eventually it forms an enormous loop that's so contorted and away from the main course of the river that it will cut itself off and the river takes a shortcut, and what's left is what's called an oxbow lake or oxbow pond. And of course this is only a little stream here, but this was once a man-made ditch. Let's see, have a wander down here. Well, in fact, I'm going to go and stand on a bit of gravel down here in the side. We're going to sight it down the middle. Now, we are making the assumption that when this began it was dead straight, which is possibly incorrect. But let's have a look. So, in fact, just here, so what we've got is the water starting to erode out over there and forming down here a little bit of a bank. So it's probably going to cut its way out over there, which means that when the water comes back off of that bend, it will cut over there, and the river will just, well, meander is exactly the right word. That's what it means. So based on our estimate that this drainage ditch was cut, let's say 50 years ago, what we get here is a general idea of how long it will take for nature to start altering the course. There's a definite bend occurring here. There's a bank down there with shingle accumulating. So there's a bend being cut out over there. And then when it comes round there, again, back to this side, it will cut here. And so on, all the way down. And you can see little banks of shingle building up. So I'm kind of surprised a little bit how straight it still is. But the other thing to bear in mind is that this watercourse only actually contains water about 50% of the time. So in the driest parts of summer, this dries up completely. In the wettest parts of winter, it's a small flood. And here's the little root of a tree. I would say that tree might have been here all along and maybe wasn't planted along with all these others. And that root there forms a little waterfall. And if you look at the previous video, we walked down here and stepped down over that, and the water underneath there is actually really quite deep now because of the action of that erosion. And here, growing on the edge of the water, we've got hedgehog fungus growing on the edge of this bank here. And these are the ones I left earlier, well, some of them. So now it might be possible to get down and actually pick some of those. It might be worth picking them. I didn't want to pick them earlier because when we came here earlier in the year they were tiny and it really would have been a terrible waste. But now they're bigger, they're opened up, and they've had a chance to spread their spores around, so I will feel a bit better about picking some of those now. While we're here, let's have a look over here. This looks to me like Amanita citrina, the false death cap, although it may not be. It may be one of the other Amanitas. I'm not terribly good at identifying the Amanita species, especially the white ones. There are some of them that are edible, some of them are deadly poisonous, so yeah, not going to take that gamble. So we got lucky with some hedgehog fungus. I usually do actually. So there's a nice one just down there, another one there, another one there. There were some more over there. I've picked a few, and actually I found another patch here that goes all the way around from here. You can see them in the leaf litter there, through this ditch, up the other side, and over there. I've picked that many. I'm going to leave the rest. So we'll go in search of some more fungi, but that patch of hedgehog mushrooms there, well, I left about half of them, probably a little over half of them, and I always feel like that's the right thing to do, because if we want these fungi to spread and always be available, we've got to leave them to spread their spores around and for other people to appreciate, of course. However, while we're on this subject, I do want to talk about the idea of destroying mushrooms, because quite a few people have said in the comments, and I'm not going to name them, they know who they are, that when I find things that are poisonous or not edible, I should destroy them. Either so that other people won't be poisoned by them, or so that there will be more of the edible species growing. And I don't agree. There are a great many things in nature that are harmful to humans, and we cannot just go around deciding that things don't have a right to exist just because they're of no utility to us or because they're harmful to us. They're part of the environment, they're part of the ecosystem, and all of those poisonous fungi have a role in breaking down decaying matter, providing food and so on for insect life, which again is part of a food chain or food web that will feed birds, other invertebrates, reptiles, all sorts of things. So when we just arbitrarily destroy a thing, there's a potential knock-on effect that's quite significant. I'm just going to stop and appreciate this light through the trees here actually. Look at that. Can't stand still for too long because I will be attacked by midges. Where was I? So, yeah, it's just terribly ignorant to destroy things because you don't think they're any use to you. So please don't do that. If you go out foraging, please, if you find something that's poisonous, just leave it be. Admire it for its natural beauty and leave it where it is. It has a part to play in the big story. And I think it's also very important that if you go out foraging, to leave at least as much as you take. There's something interesting on this tree over here. Let's go and have a look at that. Some sort of, I don't know if that's just a kind of a burr or if that's a woody bracket fungus. It looks like a fungus of some sort, but it might just be a branch scar. Don't know. Okay, I did not intend to get that close to these deer over there in the woods. I don't know if you can see them. Yeah, the stag is regarding me. Okay, well, I'm just going to keep on going. That's interesting. Really almost silent. Hardly heard them at all there. Perhaps someone can tell me whether that noise we just heard is a corvid or the infamous ringneck parakeet. I don't think we have the ringneck parakeet in this area yet, but it wouldn't surprise me. Been a lot of acorns and chestnuts this year. This will be the year when they invade new territories. They are an invasive species. Not much we can do about it, unfortunately. But yeah, if you recognise whether that was a native corvid or whether that was a ringneck parakeet, then do let me know. Okay, there's a chap down here photographing deer, so I'm going to go the other way. Now in this little ditch down here you can see loads and loads of crab apples. These are native wild apples, quite common in the New Forest, and this is one of the things that you quite often see pigs that have been let out to roam and forage for acorns, beech nuts, and probably crab apples as well. I haven't seen any this year, which is surprising, because being a massed year on the acorns, and indeed the chestnuts actually, that there's quite a lot of forage around for them. Maybe that means they haven't had to go very far, and so I haven't seen them. Right, I'll go across here somehow. It's only a little ditch, but it's surrounded by quite deep mud. Let's see what's better over here. Yeah, that's alright. It's nice to see the stream flowing again. And you'll notice one thing with the water here in New Forest streams, although it's not particularly pronounced at the moment because of the amount of rain we've had, but the water's got a brownish colour to it. Sometimes at this time of year, if the rainfall's not particularly high, the water looks like tea, and that's because of all the tannins in the leaves that fall into the water. But yeah, at the moment it's actually fairly clear, slight brownish tinge to it. The danger of walking through bracken like this is ticks. There are deer here, and there will be deer ticks present in the New Forest, and they do carry Lyme disease. So that's something to think about, and especially in the autumn at this time of year when the deer are very active and zooming about all over the place, there will be ticks on the tips of some of this bracken. So I've got my socks tucked into my trousers, or vice versa, and I'll be checking myself over when I get home. I have been bitten by ticks once or twice in the past. As I say, they do carry Lyme disease, but I think the biggest risk is if you squeeze them when you try and take them off, because that causes them to expel saliva into the wound, and that can mean that they infect you with the Lyme disease parasite. I have been fortunate enough to be bitten but not infected. So this is an example of a meandering stream, and as you can see over there, there's a curve that's cut right into the bank and then come back, and it comes around here, sweeps around here again, and you can see how it works, because if we look at the water here, the water on the right hand side here is travelling faster than the water on the left, so that will the water on the right will tend to cut away the sediment at the bank. The water on the left will tend to deposit sediment and stones, and so you can see it's deposited a big bank of shingle there that's been washed down by heavy rains when it's flooded a little bit, and on the right hand side here it's cut a deeper channel, and it will continue to cut into this bank until it gets to a point where it's created a big loop that's shorter across its neck than it is all the way around. We can have a look down here, actually we'll see maybe an example of that. So the river meanders down here, it goes off round to the left, and then sweeps right back round, and doubles back on itself. So if we have a look, that's the river there, and 180 degrees turn, that's the river there. So I'm standing on what will at some point become briefly an island, and then shortly after that the channel will cut through here and the meander will dry up or become a little pond. Let's see if we can find an example of where that's happened before, because you can see them in the landscape. So here's perhaps a slightly better example of a defunct meander. So when we look down here, there's the river goes round over there to my right, and here to my left there's a kind of depression in the ground that curls back round, and we can actually see, I don't know how well this is actually going to show up on camera, but I'll walk it. So we're at the river here, and there's a little channel that goes round here, down here, gets very deep here, and then back up again here, and curves off over there somewhere. almost certainly that is a defunct meander. It would have been at one point, briefly, this little patch of ground here would have been an island, and the river cut itself a straight channel across the neck of the meander, but then very quickly this becomes cut off. It would have been a pond for a little while, an oxbow, and then now it's dried up, and so that it's quite moist in the bottom there, but it's no longer a pond. And that's just the way that watercourses, running watercourses, evolve over time. Nature doesn't want to be in one place. So, just down here, this is interesting. It's a stinkhorn. Freshly emerged. It still has the greenish spore mass on the top. I've just seen flies actually depart from it as I walked and approached. So there we go, that's a stinkhorn. Can't see any evidence of stinkhorn eggs around, but they would be covered up under the leaf litter at the moment. If I do find an abundance of stinkhorns and I find the stinkhorn eggs, I will try them actually, because since making that other video, I saw Adam Harriton cook and eat stinkhorn eggs. You peel them, wash the slime off and cook the bit inside. Supposedly it tastes like radishes. I'm not sure if that's a recommendation. I do like radishes, but you know, if I want something that tastes like radishes, I will eat a radish normally. But it'll be interesting. If I find them in abundance in future, probably it's going to be next year, I will give them a try and see what they're like. So I hope you've enjoyed joining me on this little wander in the forest today. Not doing any cooking or very much else actually, no woodcrafting or anything like that out in the forest. We're really just out here to stroll and enjoy the falling leaves. If you want a video of just the falling leaves without me wittering on, there will be a slow TV episode coming out of this as well. I hope you've enjoyed it, I certainly have. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.